Trinity.
Okay, so
With
I don't see how.
With the Son and the Spirit existing necessarily, but being dependent on the Father.
Okay, so no, this is what we're saying is there's multiple contradictions in the idea of the Trinity, right? The first one is the proposition that the Jesus is God, which means that he's a necessary being. Jesus must be a necessary being. And if he's a necessary being, at the same time as being generated, begotten, and caused by something which is necessary, then that negates his necessity. He can't be caused and uncaused at the same time. Necessity means you're uncaused.
Right, so it's not that he's caused, it's that he's dependent on the Father.
Even that.
Right, so, but necessity doesn't mean that you're not dependent on anything, because you just agree that there are necessary factors dependent on God. Necessity doesn't mean not being dependent on anything. You just agree that there are necessary facts that depend on God.
So say that one more time.
Being necessary doesn't mean not depending on anything.
It does mean that.
Because you agreed earlier that there are necessary facts that
okay, all right. No, okay, good, excellent. Now I understand your point. So I think for Muslim scholars and philosophers and thinkers have differentiated between something which is necessary as a result of itself and necessary due to another. Okay? So in other words, they say something which is wajibly nafsihi, which is necessary because of itself. The only thing which is necessary due to itself or self-sufficient in the absolute sense is the self-subsistent necessary being, right? But you can have anything, we can have lots of things which are actually necessary due to another. So from one perspective, you're a contingent being. I'm a contingent being. That tree over there is a contingent being. But from another perspective, me and you and that tree are actually necessary. Necessary because they emanate from a necessary thing. So this is a kind of, if you believe in determinism or compatibilism, that will be the conclusion that you come to. So what I'm saying is that 2 + 2 = 4 is necessary as a fact, but it's not necessary in the sense that it has ontological self-subsistence. And that's the difference.
Right. So what Christians generally claim is that God has ontological self-subsistence.
Sure.
And that the Son doesn't have self-subsistence in that respect.
No,
the Son is dependent on God.
No, that's not what they say. They say they're co-equal and co-eternal. So if God has self-subsistence,
what I said is perfectly compatible.
No, it's not. That is subordinationism. What you've described is actually a form of subordinationism, which is considered now heretical in all three churches. So now, if you consider that Jesus is subordinate in any sense, in a dependent relationship with God or with the Father, that indicates actually that Jesus is not God. And that's the point where Muslims have been trying to make. And this is exactly, in fact, for example...
It's not that Jesus is dependent on God, it's that Jesus is dependent on the Father.
Sure.
That the Father...
But the Father is God.
The Son, which is just the standard Christian view.
What I'm saying to you is that if the Father is God, and Jesus is God, and Jesus is dependent on the Father, that indicates that you have something which is meant to be necessary, which is actually contingent and dependent, which is a contradiction of necessity. It's a very simple thing to understand.
So God is not dependent on anything. Jesus is dependent on the Father, but it doesn't make God dependent, because God, as the three persons, is not dependent.
Sure, but you're defining God in two different senses. Is Jesus God?
Yes.
Okay. Is the Father God?
Yes.
Is the Holy Spirit God?
Well, I'm not a Christian, but I'm.
But you're saying yes.
But I think
Okay, but these are Christian beliefs. I mean, that's what makes you a Christian. Okay. So let's say, for example, you believe that the Father is God. Okay. What does it mean to be God? Everyone agrees that what it means to be God is to be necessary. Everyone agrees. Do you want some? Are you sure? You can have it if you want.
No, thank you.
Yeah, all right.
Well,
okay.
Richard Swinburne, for instance, doesn't think God is necessary.
Yeah, but he also has lots of ideas, Richard Swinburne, which are really problematic. He's been refuted by someone called Scott Williamson. I don't know if you've come across this.
I was just disagreeing with your claim that everyone agrees that to be God is to be necessary.
No. So Richard Swinburne, the exception doesn't exemplify the rule. The majority of scholars, he has views. Richard Swinburne has views which actually go against the majority of scholars. For example, when he's describing the relationship between the Father and the Son, and he was asked in a peer-reviewed paper by someone called Scott Williamson, to outline where there's something called necessary agreement between three wills of God, such that, and this is the example he gave, that if the Father wanted the Son to go around the earth, or if the Father wanted the Son to go around one way, and the Son wanted the Son to go around the other, where would the Son go? Yeah. So obviously Christians have to say, well, the sun will go in one direction because there's actually uniformity of wills. Richard Swinburne, alongside other social Trinitarians, actually believe the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit have three distinct wills. If that's the case, how is it? So Richard Swinburne responds.
Swinburne does not think that.
He does that. He really does that. And he says it. And then so what happens is Swinburne says the way that he can Eucharist, and this is what Scott Williamson responds to. He says that the way in which the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit actually agree on something is because the Father is a parental relationship. This is what he says. And I've read this very recently, so I know what I'm talking about. He says there's a parental relationship between the Father and the Son, whereby the Father is, because he's the parent, he's the Father, he has to obey the Son, basically. Sorry, the Son has to obey the Father, yeah? It's like your dad has to obey the Son. Scott Williamson responds to him in that paper about necessary agreement, which you can get online, yeah? And he says to him in the paper, how is it issue of contradiction? We said already. One issue of contradiction is the fact that you believe that the Son is begotten, or in the words of the Cappadocian Fathers, he's generated. In the words of the Cappadocian Fathers, he's caused. They use the word cause openly. A necessary thing cannot be caused. If the Son, and that, by the way, this is the Quranic argument. The Quran says, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Yeah? Say he is Allah, one and only. Allahu Samad. That he is self-subsistent. He is independent. He is self-sufficient. Lam yalid walam yulad. He does not beget nor is he begotten. Walam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. And there is nothing comparable unto him. Now, notice how it says lam yalid walam yulad. Because being begotten is a nullifier to self-subsistence. So Allah is responding directly to Christians. He is saying, if God is necessary, if Jesus is necessary, if he's independent, if he's truly self-subsistent, if he's truly self-sufficient, he could not have been begotten, because if he has been begotten, that would indicate subordination, dependency, causality, causation, and it would indicate a lack of necessity.
Okay, so it wouldn't indicate a lack of necessity because, as we've already discussed,
in the ultimate sense.
Well, so it sounds like by necessity, what you really mean is independent.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So I think that in this sense, God would be independent. It would just be that.
Would Jesus be independent?
Jesus would be dependent on the Father.
That's exactly the point. So we're saying that, okay, so this is, we've got to it now.
You need to distinguish between the dependence and the independence of God as the divine nature and the independence or the independence of individual divine persons. Right? So it's not problematic. So
of course it's problematic.
So it's here's something that one might affirm, that God exists necessarily, and as a result of God's necessary existence, he necessarily knows that he exists. Okay, if a person affirms that, they would say that God's knowledge, it's necessary. Now, his knowledge would depend on his nature, but that's not a contradiction, and that wouldn't negate its necessity.
Okay, so you've just made something quite significant, and I think you need to pay attention to what you said yourself. You said Jesus is dependent, okay? He's dependent on the Father. Okay, so in that respect, would you concede that the Father has a kind of ability that the Son does not have?
No.
Okay, now this is a contradiction.
He has a property that the Son doesn't have.
Okay.
The Father has a property that the Son doesn't have.
So, and is that property allow the Father to do something that it doesn't allow the Son to do?
When you say allow, it's not like
Permit.
The Father has powers that the Son doesn't have.
Well, you just said the Father is independent. Okay, well, this doesn't sound... I don't think you're convinced by this yourself. You're a clever man. Clearly, you're not convinced by this yourself. You are not.
Why?
Now, I think
I'm not a Christian.
No. You're saying that, but you are. But here's the thing.
No, I'm not.
God is almighty, I could just be dependent on God.
No, yeah, so let's get back to this. If we're saying Jesus is God, and what it means to be God is to be independent. Because if you're dependent, and this is, by the way, this is a classic aspect of the Quranic argument. It says, كَانَ يَأْكُلَانِ طَعَامٍ. That him and his mother, Jesus and his mum, used to eat food, meaning they were dependent. It's trying to get you to understand that if there's a dependent being, then that dependent being is disqualified from being God, because to be God is to be independent and self-subsistent. If you've just admitted Jesus is dependent on the Father. If Jesus is dependent on the Father, it follows the Father is the true God and Jesus is not the true God. Jesus was created by the Father. He was generated by the Father. He is dependent on the Father. This is what the Muslim belief is.
Okay, so I don't think that's right. So was 7-year-old Muhammad Hijab
Yeah.
Muhammad Hijab?
In what sense?
Like, was the 7-year-old version of you Muhammad Hijab?
In what sense?
In the sense of being Muhammad Hijab.
Depends on how you define Muhammad Hijab. So if you define it by, is it mind or body? It's a mind or body issue. Is it a soul? So if for example,
I mean it in the sense where that you
Yeah,
would mean if you ask,
yeah.
is Muhammad Hijab
Yeah.
here? If you'd ask that when 7-year-old Muhammad
So
Hijab was
in
there,
one
would the
sense,
correct
in
answer yes.
no, in one sense you cannot answer it like that. In another sense, it's not the case, because if I believe that the human being is a composite of mind and body, the body that I've got now, which is completely different to the body I had at 7 years old, almost every single cell in my body has been replaced. Okay, so which means that from a body perspective, I'm different. So am I the same? No. Is Muhammad Hijab then the same? How would he have been dealt with the same?
If they're identical to you today. I'm
Sure,
asking
what's the question?
if it would be true to say that person is Muhammad Hijab.
In one sense, it would be true. In another sense, it would not be true.
Right. So the sense in which it's true is the sense of just describing who they are. So in a similar way to how you would say a 7-year-old Muhammad Hijab and 14-year-old Muhammad Hijab and 21-year-old Muhammad Hijab, that each of them are Muhammad Hijab, and unless you wouldn't say that 7-year-old Muhammad Hijab is 14-year-old Muhammad Hijab. In a similar way with the Trinity, you'd say that that the Father and the Son and the Spirit are not identical to each other, but they are each God.
Why is it similar?
Well, because in both cases, there's some claim about the nature and the essence of the being.
Okay.
And the fact that there's a commonality in the essence doesn't mean that the individual members that instantiate the essence are the same as each other.
Do you accept that the human being is composed of mind and body? Do you agree with mind and body dualism?
I kind of
You can't even have this analogy unless you get to the bottom of this question.
Well, I think either we're a composite of mind and body, or we're just a soul, essentially.
So then, if you don't have a strong idea of what a human being is, you can't ask this question. Is the human being mind and body or not?
Well, I largely think it's a semantic question. I think our essential property is just the possession of our soul.
It's not a semantic problem. You know very well. You've studied philosophy. So this is a question that has plagued the minds of philosophers for a long time. Either you believe in mind-body dualism or you don't. So you haven't answered the question. Because with your analogy...
I do believe in mind-body dualism.
Okay, sure. So if you believe in mind-body dualism, then the question of Muhammad Hijab at 7 years old, is he the same as Muhammad Hijab at 33 right now? The answer is no. The answer is no. He's not actually.
Yeah, that was my point.
Yeah, he's not the same.
But it's true that you when you were 7, it would have been true to say Muhammad Hijab exists. The 7-year-old.
But what it meant to be Muhammad Hijab when I was 7 is different to what it means when I was 33.
I don't think it's true that what it meant is different.
Yeah, it does. Of course it is. If you believe in mind-body dualism, a 6'7", 120 kilogram guy is different from a little 20 kilogram boy. Would you agree with that? Whose cells have completely changed every single cell of his body.
That the being that made it true, the truth maker for their Muhammad Hijab existing, was different when you were 7 than you today. So here's an analogy. 10 years ago, it would have been true to say, the following sentence would have been true: there are people at the park. And today, it would have been true to say there are people at the park. It's different people that are making it true that there are people at the park. So it's a different version of Muhammad Hijab.
If I took this chair that I'm sitting on, and I replaced each aspect of this chair with another material, I took this and put a plastic one, and I put here and I put a red one, not a green one, yeah? Would it be the same chair or would it be a different chair?
I have sort of weird views on this, but
What's the answer?
So I think that there will be two distinct, like worms, objects that stretch through time, one of which is composed of the old chair and the new chair, and one of which is not, and then it's just a semantic question. Which
if
one
I
is different.
took
so I'm what's called a Merological universalist. So I think that every collection of distinct Merological symbols forms its own composite object. So like there's an object composed of
even on that view, even on the view, I'm asking a simple question. If I took if I took this chair, I replaced each aspect of this chair with another material. Is it the same chair or is it a different chair?
Well, I was giving my answer, but I didn't seem very satisfied with it. It would be when you ask, is it the same chair or is it a different chair? There's one object composed of the chair at both times. So there's one object in which it's the same. There's one object in which it's different. Well, actually, there are a lot of objects in which it's the same and different. So, let's see.
At the point where everything has been replaced. So, for example, if I take these glasses, and I replace this with a white one, yeah? This one with a white one. This here with a white one, and I change the lenses. And I change this thing as well. If you took your glasses, you went to Specsavers, yeah? And you tell them fix it. They say, no problem, we're gonna fix it, yeah? And then they changed each aspect of the glasses. Your glasses now, they changed this one like that into white. Everything, even the bolts, everything has changed. They just kept changing things. Would you go back and say, these are not my glasses, or would you say these are my glasses? Let me take them. Simple question.
Well, so I think that, like, okay, here's an analogy.
I know that. I've got the joke version of this. You go, I've had this broom for like 20 years. You go, I've replaced the head 5 times and the handle 5 times as well.
Exactly.
So there's only 2 parts.
Yeah.
Oh.
So consider any atom at the periphery of that chair, and then ask, is that atom part of the chair? Well, there's one way of defining the chair on which the atom's part of it. There's one way of defining the chair on which the atom's not part of it. My account of it.
Go on. How would you do it where the atom's not part of it?
My account is that there are distinct composite objects, distinct and overlapping composite objects, composed of different assemblies of matter. So there's a composite object that is the chair with the atom, and another one that's composed of the chair without the atom. And it's a semantic question about which of those.
It's not semantic at all. This is a scientific question.
You're jumping on the word semantic, but you're not getting my point. My point is, if there are 2 objects, one of which contains the extra atom and the other one doesn't, it's a semantic question which one you're talking about.
Okay. So if you went to the Specsavers and you gave your glasses, and they changed each part of your
This guy's the second fight. Sorry.
Stop it, man. Stop.
Thank God he's gone.
This is embarrassing, man. They need to.
I can't really, sensibly challenge people to fights over philosophy disputes. I don't think it would go great for me.
Okay. So going back to the point we were making about dependency.
How many cameras are
Going back to the dependency, do you see that there's what is dependency, first of all? How do you understand it?
So, it's a bit hard to define precisely. Something is dependent if, for it to be the case, it requires another thing.
Whether it's dependent on
something which is reliant on something else for its existence.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Okay, so if you're saying Jesus is that, how can you see that Jesus is God and that at the same time? That's all my question is. Simple.
Well, the things that are true of God as the divine nature are not the same as the things that are true of every member of every particular divine person. Right? So this is
You're not answering my question. You're making another point. How?
I'm not making another point.
Okay, no, but how is Jesus God and how is he dependent and God at the same time?
Because all the properties that are true of the divine nature in the sense of being God in that sense are not true of each member of the Trinity. So you're assuming that whatever.
Okay.
So you're assuming that whatever is true of each of the divine persons has to be true of God.
So okay.
That's the entire.
What is discussion?
The
So
premise
is Jesus a
is
part of God?
rejecting that idea.
Is Jesus a part of God?
There are different accounts on which.
What's your account?
Well, as I say, I'm not a Christian. I was just disagreeing that you could.
No, but what is your account?
Well, I don't believe in the Trinity.
Okay, so why are we talking about this?
Well, because I don't think. So you are. No, I don't think that you are suggesting that there's a contradiction in the Trinity. I don't think there's a contradiction.
Okay.
Because
Well,
at some point you'd have to either suggest that it's made of parts, or you say that he's not.
But yeah, I guess
parts.
if were I to be a Trinitarian, I think I would affirm that the divine persons are parts of God.
oh, you would, yeah?
I would, yeah.
In what sense? In the sense that they can be disassembled? Like the chair?
No,
Or like the glasses?
I don't think that Trinitarians would affirm that they could be disassembled.
Okay, so in what sense are they parts?
Well, they're distinct such that the things that are the things that are true, they're distinct from God in the sense that the things that are true of them are not necessarily true.
But you're aware that
And-
partialism
and
is a
correct.
heresy?
Which council condemned?
All of them.
I actually don't think that's true. I did
No,
a little bit of looking on.
no.
into this.
Partialism is heresy.
Okay, where is partialism condemned?
Every single Eastern Orthodox Church,
No,
Catholic
but
Church.
That's not a council. That's a church.
I don't know what council, but I know it's a heresy. Partialism council is
I
a
don't think
heresy.
it's a heresy.
Put it on ChatGPT. You'll see.
Okay.
They'll
Well,
say partialism is a heresy in Christianity.
I've done some googling about this, and I don't know.
No, I can assure you it's a heresy.
Okay. Anyone want to Google is partialism a heresy?
Yeah. No, the reason why I say that is because I came across something from William Craig, where he was saying that he was actually affirming a kind of partialism. Yeah. So I went and searched what other people are saying about that, and I realized that his contemporaries and his colleagues. So, and they came from different schools of thought.
Yeah, I do.
So like some Catholics would say that his idea of it is a heretical. So that's the thing with Christianity. You either go into fallacy or heresy.
It is.
It's a heresy, I told you.
Wait, where does it?
According to ChatGPT, he told me to use
Okay, wait,
ChatGPT.
and can
Well,
you ask-
it's ask it the sources. Yeah, ask it the sources.
Okay, so nice.
Wait, sorry, can I just see what ChatGPT says on the matter?
Isn't it enough that Jesus was a mighty
Ask
prophet?
him from a fresh page.
Yeah.
We'll see which.
Oh yeah,
All
yeah,
other prophets before him.
yeah, yeah.
You get yourself in a incredible confusion, and you don't know what you're talking about no more.
It depends. I didn't read all of it. I just saw Orthodoxy as a heresy, but then I didn't continue.
Muslims
Yeah, and
believe in
partialism
Jesus.
is a heresy. Trust me.
Muslims believe in Jesus.
That's the thing. Like with Christianity, they will either have to leave their religion to try and justify it, to try and make sense of it, or they can affirm their religion and create fallacies.
What it feels like to be a Christian is like bending your legs in some way, or your arms, just
Yeah,
to
yeah.
fit
But
in.
you
Yes,
know,
not unless, if only. If only it was like that.
Mention who was behind all this big lie, which is Paul
Yeah.
and his people. You know,
Yeah.
they turned the whole thing into
It's
something
absolutely, and that's
else.
another
We
point.
never really kind of discussed that.
They should discuss it. The historical point of how Trinity transforms. Yeah, absolutely. Like for example, the Holy Spirit, right? He made a good point. He said that the development of the Trinity, the historical development of the Trinity. Yeah, with the historical development of the Trinity
as a specific heresy, was not formally condemned by name at any ecumenical council.
until.
That's the end of the sentence.
No, okay, keep researching it.
Yeah, so the next after that it says, however, its core idea was implicitly condemned by the early church councils.
Yeah,
Find
that's it.
orthodoxy. No, well, hold on. So there's dispute about whether it counts as a heresy because
No. It's
what is heretical is to think that the Father, Son, and the Spirit are not themselves God, but it's not heretical
Okay.
But if you have a version of partialism on which you think they all count as God, then
yeah, but that's what you believe. You just said that you believe Jesus is God.
I don't agree.
You said that you believe Jesus is God, and you also said that you believe Jesus is part of God.
I think I was saying that sort of wearing the Christian hat. But to be clear, I don't think Jesus.
So
is God. I'm not a Christian.
you don't believe it no more, yeah?
Well, I didn't believe it. Before.
Okay, how about you just believe? How about what's the
What's
name again?
Matthew.
Matthew. Sorry, I've got to take your name. How about you think about Islam now? Because let's be honest, yeah. Let's be honest. I think that your mind, your critical mind, and your ability to understand
I think Islam is
your
way more
analytical
obviously
mind.
false than Christianity.
Tell me why. You said
Okay.
Islam is false. Give me a reason why Islam is false. Go on.
Sure. So
Your strongest argument.
Okay, so I think the extended, I think there are a lot of arguments. The extended
give me your best one.
digression in hell, where they describe, boiling off the skins of people and then bringing them back on,
Alright.
and then, boiling it off repeatedly.
Sure.
This does not seem like the actions of a perfectly loving and
That's
merciful
not.
God.
That's not.
a moral argument.
No, that's
I agree it's a moral argument.
That's not a divine that's not a creedal disproven argument. It's not an undercutter to the religion of Islam. So if you believe that hellfire is something which God wouldn't do, you don't even know what God is. You think that God is dependent. You think God is Jesus. You think God is a part of God and God at the same time.
Okay,
Come on.
What I was saying earlier was I think that I disagree with you that there's some explicit contradiction in the Trinity. Now, I don't affirm the Trinity. I'm not a Christian.
What's the explicit
In terms-
contradiction of a God putting people in hellfire and
I don't think it's an explicit contradiction. I also don't think here's another belief that's not.
So it's not a contradiction.
Yeah.
So it's not false then. So
No, that's absolutely wrong. There are lots of beliefs that are false, but that aren't a contradiction.
Sure.
Error theory, for instance, which affirms that there are
No.
no moral facts. I think error theory is
Okay.
absolutely
So
wrong. but there's no
how would you
contradiction.
disprove it if not with the proof of contradiction? Give me another proof. Why is it wrong? In what
Right,
respect
so
is it wrong?
So I'm what's called a phenomenal conservative, where I think the way we figure out what's true is we look at the ways that things seem, and then we have default trust in the way that things seem, unless there's a strong reason to doubt it.
Yeah, like Swinburne. That's
So-
what he believes as well.
Yeah, I'm a big Swinburne fan.
Yeah.
But
He called this. He called it something else actually. He called it the credulity, something else, principle of credulity.
Principle of credulity.
Yeah,
that's
principle
to
of
say.
credulity, isn't it? Yeah, principle of
I
credulity. Yeah,
suppose
that's
my
right.
hypothesis, and
Yeah.
Jesus is God. To say.
You look a bit like him, but maybe a younger version.
Yeah. But so I think and absent relying on the principle that things are as they seem prior to being given a strong reason to doubt it, we would basically be in complete nihilism, skepticism land, where if you get down to any of our foundational beliefs, I think they'll just depend on things that are really obvious. And I find the notion that that it's wrong to torment people forever in arbitrarily horrible ways, that's immoral, that you shouldn't do that.
Sure,
Particularly
but,
when it's in your
for-
power to
for-
redeem them. I find that to be about as obvious as any ethical truth, I believe.
Yeah, but you're saying that. Here's the thing. For example, right, Swinburne in his book about God, I forget the name of the book, but he made an argument from base theory. I don't know if you come across it. And he was basically making a probabilistic argument that God is probably the best explanation for the existence of the universe, etc. The point is that you haven't even attempted to do that. So you've just said something. You said that I believe in things are true unless I'm given. This is the principle of credulity that Swinburne believes in. You believe that things are true unless you are given explicit reason for them not to be true. Okay.
Hold on. That is not the principle that I was espousing. The principle is if something seems true, you have a reason to think it's true absent a reason.
That's an important distinction. Fine. So if something seems true, unless you're given a reason not to believe it. Now here's the point. On what basis do you look at, for example, eternal punishment in hellfire? And on what basis can you falsify that? Because if that's your strongest argument against Islam.
Why I don't know if it's my strongest there.
Okay, well, it seems like you mentioned it, so it must be very strong in your eyes. You must see that as a very strong argument.
I do, yeah.
Okay, but you can't explain to me what the tension is, why that makes it false.
Okay, so here's a very obvious ethical principle that we all accept in ordinary life. If you're going to cause others suffering, you need to have some justification for it. If I were to stab you in the eye, and you ask me why did I do that? I say I have no justification. I'm just doing it, right? Then it would be pretty clear that I was acting wrongly. And so then the question is, okay, so are there goods commensurate with torturing people forever that make it justified to torture people forever in pursuit of those goods? So then the question is, okay, is there a plausible story on which there are such goods? And so what are the goods?
Yeah, so you've just made my argument for me in the sense that you said that you're basically saying that if you punish somebody for no crime, then that's a kind of injustice. That's basically what you're saying, right? And I'm saying I don't disagree with that proposition. But for example, when the Quran talks about the boiling of the skin, actually it was talking about the hypocrites, the religious hypocrites, the ones who posed as Muslims and then they pretended and they rejected they were infidels in that sense. They rejected the message of truth. And that's why it says, إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ فِي الدَّرْكِ الْأَسْفَلِ مِنَ النَّارِ, that certainly the hypocrites, the religious hypocrites, are in the lower pits of the hellfire. كُلَّمَا نَضِجَتْ جُلُودُهُم بَدَّلْنَاهُم جُلُودًا غَيْرَهَا لِيَذُوقُوا الْعَذَابِ, that every time their skins fall off, we have replaced them with skins that are actually different to their skins so that they can taste the punishment. But in the same exact chapter that Allah says that, which is chapter 4, Allah also mentions, مَا يَفْعَلُ اللَّهُ بِعَذَابِكُمْ إِن شَكَرْتُمْ وَآمَنْتُمْ, that what would Allah do with your punishment if you are grateful and you are believers. So in other words, it's making it clear that there is a justification for the punishment, which is the ingratitude, the ultimate ingratitude of the human condition, or the human being, the disbeliever, and the ultimate disbelief of these are the two things which this verse indicates are the justifications for someone in hellfire forever. Now you might think that that's unfair in your mind, but then that's a subjective value judgment. That's an aesthetic value judgment. Because there's no way of proving that it's unfair.